Welcome to the Consultants Training Institute's Conversations with the Masters series. I am Brian Jones. This installment of the Conversations with the Masters series will feature a conversation with Neil Beaton. Neil is an ASA, CPA, ABV, Managing Director of Valuation Services for Alvarez & Marshall in Seattle, Washington. Neil was also affiliated with Grant Thornton for many years as the partner in charge for valuation services. Neil specializes in the valuation of privately and publicly held businesses and intangible assets for the purposes of litigation support, sales, mergers and acquisitions, ESOPs, incentive stock options, and estate and tax planning, in addition to providing economic analysis for personal injury and wrongful death actions. Please enjoy this installment of the Conversations with the Masters series featuring Neil Beaton. Neil, pleasure to have this opportunity to sit and chat with you.
Mine too.
To include you in our Conversations with the Masters series. And also thank you for participating in this Fair Value Congress here in Seattle as one of the presenters today.
It was excellent. I enjoyed it myself.
So, you have been in the valuation profession for many years, contributing in lots of areas. Tell us about how you got involved or interested in the accounting profession and the finance profession in general from school and where you went to school and a little bit about your practice.
You bet. An interesting way that I got to where I'm here today, and I use the analogy of nodes. You come up to a certain point and you've got a choice. You can go right or you can go left. I've had a number of choices over my life that said I need to make a decision. The first one, of course, was school. Okay. I actually had a scholarship to become an attorney in my undergrad. So I went through my whole undergrad schooling with the anticipation of becoming an attorney.
Which one?
At Stanford University.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I took some law classes and pre-law classes, didn't really like it. So I decided to gravitate to what I liked, economics. Okay. So again, my first taste of really what my calling was in school, deciding what I really wanted to do. I had a role model as a high schooler of a very successful attorney, and that's what I wanted to be. Ultimately, within my being, it was just the calling was numbers. And so I went economics. I graduated still with the intent of going to law school, got a summer job at Dun & Bradstreet Corporation, which is, of course, is a financial services conglomerate. And I started analyzing businesses. I loved it. And that was really the starting point of my business looks and how to really get involved in business. I then went on to grad school there in San Diego at a place called National. Okay. Got my MBA, did all that, and then I reached the pinnacle, what I call the pinnacle at Dun & Bradstreet, which was called a national analyst. After that, it was going back to New York and sitting behind a desk and pushing a pencil. Okay. And it just wasn't what I like to do. I like to be rolling my sleeves up and getting into it. And so I quit Dun & Bradstreet, joined a small boutique business valuation firm, and here I am today.
So from law to economics, what was it that you really loved about it? I mean, that's a strong word to use. Hopefully most people love what they do, but what was it that you loved about the economics?
It really was a love of numbers more than it was a love of words. And I can't really explain specifically that twist, but what I found in my pre-law work was there was so much ambiguity and so much movement, I just wasn't comfortable with it. I liked the finiteness, if you will, of numbers. Okay. 1 + 1 = 2. But gray and black and white can move and change depending on how you do that. Okay. So I would say really it was the rigidity and structure of numbers that really drew me to the profession.
Did you always specialize in financial reporting, or how did you? What were some of the areas where you specialized, and how did you find one of the areas where you specialize and are most well known for finance reporting and fair value?
Right. Again, all the node points that one hits. So when I joined my prior firm, it was a small boutique. I had to wear lots of hats. And so we did valuation, we did litigation, we did very little fair value at the time when I joined back in '89. But about 5 years later, 1994, I still remember the time, I was asked to give a speech for Coopers & Lybrand on valuing what we call stock-based compensation, stock options.
Okay.
So I did a presentation. The accountants in the room liked that presentation. It was very new. There really wasn't a fair value component at that point. But stock options were being granted because that was if you remember back, the internet was starting to grow.
Right.
And it really expanded right after that. So 95, 96, 97. And it was really a serendipitous time, again, where I fell into an opportunity to speak. Once I spoke on that, the demand for the services in fair value just ballooned. And that's really how I got where, again, my expertise being early stage companies in granting those stock options came from the environment.
Okay.
We had Microsoft and the 70 Dwarfs, right? Because they spun out all kinds of new companies who were granting options. And so being in Seattle and having Microsoft and generating all kinds of new companies for support allowed me that environment so that I could then hone my skills really in the financial valuation of stock options for issues of compensation.
What are some of the big issues that individuals practicing in this area should be aware of right now?
If you're getting into fair value measurement, and that all of the ASCs, the accounting standards codification, 350, 805, 820, 718, all of the issues that surround that, having some accounting background to me is very critical.
Okay.
I was part of an accounting firm, and I understood and knew about the accounting rules. Just having the one-sided valuation for those things, although very good, and there are a number of practitioners who've never been in an accounting firm, I think it's easier and allows the individual to understand quicker and, to me, and more in depth. So for someone getting into it, the opportunity to work either in or very closely with an accounting firm would be my recommendation.
You spoke in your presentation about practice aids that are soon to be released, I believe April of 2012. Tell us about the relevance of those practice aids and how they will help the profession.
Okay, just as the name would suggest, they're an aid. They're not going to tell you how to do it,
Right.
but it's an aid to, listen, I'm involved in valuing securities that are issued as compensation. What are some of the best practices out there? So rather than having to reinvent the wheel, and we did that back in 2002 where we actually put the initial practice aid together, you now have some guideposts. If I have this situation, what do I do? And the practice aid, and there's a number of them out there, the IPR&D that Dave Dufadoc spoke about, there's the contingent consideration, there's a number of them very specific that give you guideposts. It's like running a race, right? If you're running, it's always nice to know where's the race course, right? You still have to run, you still have to put in the effort, but there are indications of where can I go, and if I get too far off, what will happen to me?
Right, get back on track.
Exactly.
The profession has grown so rapidly over 20 years, and as you mentioned, you've been practicing since the mid to late 80s.
That's correct.
Some of the folks who started out pioneering, yourself, Jim Hitchner, obviously Shannon Pratt, what was it like working back in those days? I mean, really sort of in the infancy of a profession.
As I even stated this morning, it was truly the Wild West. We had to create tools. We had to think through situations that didn't exist. New opportunities and new techniques were actually being brought to us from others that we had to review. It was really a time, and again, going back to my Wild West analogy, it was like the gold rush. where there was a vast open plats of land. And you didn't know when you put down your homestead if you're going to have a gold vein or if you're going to have to farm for the rest of your life. And so those that were out there were really homesteading. They were getting a piece of ground. Jim did great for a number of things in his area. Of course, Shannon, now going into cost of capital, having Shannon's book, Jim's book. We have Gary Trugman out there with his book. Of course, Robert Riley and Robert Sway's, both, again, continuing to create and build out on these, what I'll call these land grabs, and saying, listen, I'm an expert here. And so what we saw is there was a lot of opportunity early on. A number of individuals really reached out and grabbed for a lot of that area. So that was really the early stage was, what do I want to do? The opportunities were phenomenal and fantastic. And again, I think as it's grown, as in anything, the opportunities for new things have shrunk, and it's much more difficult. And again, it's a lot easier for a lot of new individual practitioners coming in to look around and say, you know what? There's nothing new under the sun. I'm just going to study what's out there and move my practice forward, and I think that's a real danger to the profession.
What are some of the challenges you see as the profession has become so overwhelmed and oversaturated? I mean, there's numerous credentials, all kinds of conferences, industry standards, case law, all kinds of things that a practitioner has to stay up with. What do you see as navigating through all of those things, some of the challenges that you're faced with?
Boy, and I had this conversation with some of my younger staff just recently about where they need to go and what I believe they need to do. And this is the world according to Neil.
Okay.
So, but I think the bottom line for any new person moving into this profession is to have and continue to have and really cultivate an intellectual curiosity, because it's not all done.
Right.
There are things that are new, and there are things that are waiting to be discovered. I do a lot of litigation work, and it's amazing how the number of questions I get asked about, and I answer, I don't know. I haven't thought about it that way. So there's always something there. Now again, it's finer and finer, so it's going to take the individuals, like I said, the curiosity to say, I'm not satisfied with Shannon's answer. I'm not satisfied with Jim's book. I want to know more about it. And if you read those books, you'll find even they themselves say, hey, there's other ways to look at this. And again, to those individuals who are not complacent, who do want to continue on, I do believe there's phenomenal opportunity that exists. Give you one example, international realm, which I've given some speeches on, and there is a dearth of information on international valuation.
Okay.
We're a little xenophobic here in the U.S. If you go to Europe, I was just down in Australia, New Zealand, they are constantly looking out for their valuation needs. We are constantly looking in. If we turn that out and start saying, how can we take what we know here with very active markets, with lots of information, how do we expand that into our neighbor to the north, Canada, to our neighbors to the south, Mexico, South America? There are lots of need and growth in those areas that are not really being covered by the Jim Hitchners, the Shannon Pratts, and the Roger Grabowskis of the world. They're waiting for someone to go down and help them perform and create the methodologies and the practice aids that we have here in the United States.
That's a very valuable piece of advice for practitioners coming into the profession, representing two credentialing organizations, the NACVA and the IBA. We are seeing the demographic of our memberships really changing, and learning and wanting to learn about how to expand into the profession, and then also into the realm of academics and students, graduate students. So the reason for holding this conference here at Seattle University is to give those accounting and finance students information about opportunities for their future. So what do you do in your free time? Or do you have any?
Oh yeah, I got to fight for it. It is not something that comes to me. I have got to fight for it. I have a 4-year-old girl, and my wife and I travel extensively, both for work, which is primary, but we also travel. I take my daughter around the world with me. We do different things. You mentioned NACVA, but there's also the IACVA.
Right, you're right.
And working with Jim Caddy and Bill Hanlon on pushing out valuation techniques and that. So for free time, I look for opportunities. I'm an avid water skier. So if you get on my LinkedIn site, you'll see my picture of water skiing. And I'm an avid surfer.
Oh.
So I love water.
Okay.
And of course, in Seattle, I don't get to do much of either.
Right.
So the travel component, along with my desire to surf and water ski, takes me to a place where that's what I do with my free time.
Where are your favorite places to do those two things?
Well, surfing, I'm heading to a place in Mexico in 2 weeks, going down for 3 or 4 days, called Sayulita, which is just north of Puerto Vallarta. I keep my board in San Diego, where I grew up, and I got my wetsuit, my board, and all my buddies. And so every time I go down there, make a quick phone call, coming down,
let's go.
We're all set, and we go out every day for a few hours and enjoy our time.
4-year-old daughter.
Yes.
Wow, she's got to keep you busy.
Oh my! So 19, 15, 14, 12, and 4. They all keep me busy.
And young.
And young.
Yeah.
And young. Very enjoyable.
So you're from San Diego area.
Correct.
That's a great city. What was it like growing up there?
It was just as you would imagine. I don't remember watching TV because there were so many outside opportunities. So I played tennis with my dad. I surfed. We were outside constantly. It just allowed a young man like myself to just enjoy the realm. And I didn't really appreciate it until I moved away to Seattle. And this is back again in '85. So I spent about half my life in San Diego, about half of it up here. Ultimately, I think I'll probably head back down to California to get some sunshine.
It's beautiful. I live in Salt Lake City, and a number of my friends have relocated from there to San Diego, and it's envious. They're always posting sunny, 76 degrees every single day. Love to rub that in. But the weather in the city here is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's, again, in our profession, what's interesting is you can work from anywhere. I mean, when I was down in New Zealand in October for about 3 weeks, I was writing reports and doing things from there that no one knew I was gone. So the physical location for what we do is another real plus for individuals who like to get into the industry, because it doesn't require you necessarily to be in one spot. Very helpful when you're building your career.
Sure.
But ultimately, when you've established yourself and all of a sudden now you're getting known, it doesn't really matter. Most of the time I spend on the plane anyway. So I have an office where I have pictures on the wall, but really I go to where my clients need me.
Yeah. Neil, thank you so much for participating in this series and for giving so much to this profession.
You're welcome.
And obviously you're not done yet, so
yeah,
thanks for
get a few more.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.